Hi, everybody. Today is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025, and our friend Graham Fuller is back with us. Welcome back, Graham.
Thank you very much, Nima.
Graham, let's start with the article in the Financial Times talking about the use of drones, the capability by AI, and all of that. When it comes to this type of articles, do you think it's part of rhetoric? It's part of the reality of what's going on? Your take on that?
Well, was a fascinating article, and Gilbert Doctorow's interest and support of the article was equally fascinating to me, if not astonishing. But anyway, Gilbert himself commented that the FT is known to be a very anti-Russian publication and has been for a very long time. So as soon as I read something coming from the FT, my antenna go up a little bit as to what is going on. The FT is a very distinguished newspaper in many respects, and it's reporting on international financial issues, etc. But its foreign policy preferences are very, very clear and have long time been highly anti-Russian. So one has to ask the question, what's going on here? My take is, I mean, we're looking beyond what people say as to why they would be saying these things. My sense is that the Financial Times is attempting to give a great cheer and boost and morale boost to the West of saying, look, Ukraine can do all this by itself. We don't need the British. We don't need the Americans. We don't need anybody. Ukraine is better than anybody else in AI. This means that, even if the US walks away, we still have a serious chance to win this war in Europe. And you Europeans should be excited about this because it's a sign that we're powerful and we're not going to give up. And we have people, we're doing very, very well. I find this, frankly, quite incredible. Um, I am not an expert on AI, but I think if you and I and others listen over the years now, we've been talking about AI and the use of drones and all of these other things. I find it quite incredible that not only that the Ukrainian capabilities would be praised, but I think the article, as Dr. O said, claimed that Ukraine was maybe better than anybody else in the business, and at least as an equal to Russia, and much better than the U.S. and much better than the Brits or whatever else. So I just find this quite incredible, and the only reasonable explanation I can give for this is to excite the European base and say, yes, guys, we're winning, we're better than the opposition, and let the US do what it wants, but we can win this war.
Yeah. When you talk about that, the maybe Europeans or whoever is behind it is trying to say that Ukraine is capable of continuing the conflict and continuing the war. Do they really want to withdraw from the main goal? If you were to assume that the sort of assumption that you've been talking about, is that going to be a strategy on the part of the United Kingdom? They want to withdraw from Ukraine. They want to say that they're capable. Let's provide them with everything they need. They can do it. Maybe just below the surface, sending mercenaries to Ukraine to
Yeah,
feed the
I
war.
that's an interesting comment, Nima. I'm not sure I agree or not. I don't think the Brits want to pull out of this. They've been involved since day one or since several years back, as you know, in being highly active in trying to damage any possibility of an agreement or an accord between Russia and the US or even Russia and Ukraine. So I don't think the British are ready to give up on this at all. I think they will still want to be players, major players, but behind the scenes, and want Europe not to give up, not to lose hope, not to believe all the American propaganda and John Mearsheimer's propaganda and Scott Ritter's propaganda. We're winning, and let's go with it. And to hell with the U.S., we can do it anyway. I just find this absurd.
If that's absurd in your opinion, why is Donald Trump so much incapable of? Because look at the way that Trump is dealing with with Ukraine, with the case of Ukraine and Europe. Why he so much shows some sort of weakness when it comes to Ukraine? I don't know why. Who's putting pressure on him? Who's trying to convince him that Ukraine is that all about the problem with the intelligence getting there, getting through the channels to get to Donald Trump? What is the problem, in your opinion?
I don't really think it's purely an intelligence problem. And furthermore, as I'm sure you know, you can have all kinds of intelligence information. But the key question is, how do you interpret this information? Certainly, almost all the people that I respect who are following the war say that Ukraine is losing the war, has almost lost the war, that their manpower situation is critical, that the Europeans are running out of weapons to deliver, and that Trump himself is uncomfortable with continuing the war, but he hasn't actually pulled the plug on the war either. But he certainly encouraged negotiations there and certainly has discussed seriously with Russia these issues in a way that Biden would have been completely incapable of doing. So I'm not sure it's strictly an intelligence question, but a matter of what people want to get out of this. And as you know, within the United States itself, there are huge hawkish factions. I mean, most of Congress is very hawkish. All the neocons are hawkish. All the pro-Zionist forces are hawkish. Um, so it's very, very difficult for, I guess, for Trump to feel that he has much room to maneuver in moving towards in trying to move towards a settlement. I think he will want to do that. My instinct is that's where he is going, but it's very difficult. Now, if I may, just going back to Gilbert Doctorow again, I think it's interesting as to why Doctorow, for whom I have great respect, he's very intelligent. He's a native Russian speaker. He spends time there. He listens to Russian TV, talk shows and things of that sort. I don't want to explain away uh, Gilbert's views because that would be unfair and disrespectful. But I think there are several factors in Gilbert's thinking. One is that he would very much like to avoid a war between the United States and Russia. I absolutely agree with him. We do want to avoid a war between the United States and Russia. But his comments are moving it in the direction of saying, it's no longer really about the United States and Russia anymore. It's about Ukraine and Russia. And so Ukraine is going to do what it has to do, but it's not really the United States' responsibility anymore in this. It's also, I found it quite fascinating that the White House sort of hinted that Trump did not really know about this forthcoming attack against these Russian nuclear aircraft deep in the heart of Russia. Furthermore, Russia has kind of said, yes, we accept that the United States didn't know. I don't really believe that either. First of all, I find it even if CIA is not completely competent, I find it impossible to believe that a CIA so deeply embedded in the Ukrainian situation would not have had some idea, some whiff, some smell that something like this was coming, even if they weren't directly involved. And secondly, it's diplomatically very intelligent and wise for Russia to accept the fact that Trump did not know anything about this. This avoids a confrontation between Putin and Trump. And so Putin may say, well, his intelligence services are not very good, or they didn't keep him informed, but I'm not blaming Trump. So this helps move away from a direct conflict between the two men, and maybe lowers the temperature and makes it easier to have some kind of negotiations. If Russia had said, we believe Trump did know about it, immediately that puts up a problem when we get to negotiations of saying, okay, you say you want peace, but then why did you agree to doing this thing? And finally, lastly, I think that the I think that the Trump administration very much wants to avoid a direct confrontation with Russia on this question, and maybe it is now possible for them to talk together, having avoided the issue of who knew what and who didn't know what. Also, maybe I think Russia's also like to suggest that there is a rift between, say, U.S. intelligence agencies and Trump himself, that puts suspicion in Trump's mind. That's part of the game to separate them there, and part of the last thing I think I would point out about all the Russian line on this is, you'll notice, Nima, all along now for days, Russia has said, we think the UK was behind this, and then saying there's good evidence. And now Lavrov said, I think yesterday, that we have 100% evidence that the UK was behind this. If I were the UK embassy, I would want to send all my people home, back to London for a couple of months until things change. What could be a more direct threat than this statement by Lavrov of 100% knowledge? We know that Russia has not yet taken a decisive rebuff, a decisive response against this attack against Russian aircraft. We're still waiting for that to happen. There have been small incidents, but nothing so far that we would say, this is the big moment of revenge that we've been waiting for. Well, if I were the UK, I would be very, very nervous that I would be the first point of revenge of having thought up this idea, carried, coordinated with the Ukrainians, and was deeply involved in it all. I think UK better be very, very careful. They've been put on warning, if not explicitly, it's implicit, as could possibly be. Maybe,
Graham, I think
what would it be? I mean, nuclear, people have talked about British nuclear submarines, whatever else. I think one of your guests also discussed what the U.S. would do if the Russians decided to take out some British nuclear submarines. I think one of your guests, I forget who it was, said the United States would probably not respond if that happened, to avoid a nuclear confrontation. But these are incredible issues, incredible issues.
yeah, I think what's so dangerous in the concept that Ukraine is not Ukrainians can do whatever they want, and the United States bears no responsibility for that, or the United Kingdom is out of it's it's just nonsense. Because look at the Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. Look at the way that Russia tried to negotiate with the West in December 2021. They didn't send the letter to United Kingdom, to Germany, or even France. France and Germany were guarantors of Minsk 2015. And how they don't care about Europeans anymore. They want to negotiate. They want a big deal between Russia and the United States. That's why they're so hesitant in their response. They're trying to see something. They're trying to find, as you mentioned, they're so intelligent. They're so intelligent that they know that if even Donald Trump knew about it, they don't need to say it in his face.
That's
They
right.
have to.
And if we get to the motivation of Gilbert Doctorow himself, I don't want to examine him psychologically, but we have to, I think, when I was so shocked by his remarks. Um, on some program, maybe it was talking to Indian television or something, Gilbert explicitly said that Russia was being overly cautious, should be bolder in its treatment of Ukraine if it wants to bring an end to this war. And he even specifically mentioned the word decapitation. That means taking out Zelensky directly. And that may be what he may be encouraging it, but it may be what Putin is considering as the definitive strike back in response to this. First of all, the effort to assassinate um, uh, to Putin when he was visiting in Kursk with his helicopter, and secondly, now after this aircraft operation. The punishment, Gilbert Doctorow is openly urging destruction of the Ukrainian government and Zelensky himself.
You know what's amazing? A Persian poet says that you see the fruit, I see the garden. And I think Russia sees the garden. They want something important. They don't care about Zelensky. If Zelensky would be in power or decapitate Zelensky, who's Zelensky? Nobody.
Well, the yes, except the FT, the Financial Times, is saying that Zelensky is everything. That Ukrainian technology is better than almost better than Russia, and certainly better than the U.S. So, in that sense, at least the Financial Times wants to pretend that Zelensky matters very much and that Europe should go with Zelensky against the US and against anybody else that wants to bring an end to this war.
Graham, Tulsi Gabbard yesterday, she published a video talking about the danger of having a nuclear conflict, having a nuclear war. Here is what she said. I want to know, when she's talking this way, is it that related to the pressure coming from the neocons in the United States in terms of what's going on in Ukraine, or is it something to consider with China or even Iran? Here is what she said.
Today, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before, political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers. Perhaps it's because they are confident that they will have access to nuclear shelters for themselves and for their families that regular people won't have access to. So it's up to us, the people, to speak up and demand an end to this madness. We must reject this path to nuclear war and work toward a world where no one has to live in fear of a nuclear holocaust.
There has to be something so serious that she decided to publish this video. What is, in your opinion, what is the main concern on her part?
It's a terrific statement that she made, and I applaud her willingness to say this in very blunt and direct terms. I think I don't know what she knows more about the situation than anybody else, but certainly in charge of American intelligence, she has to be deeply dismayed by people like Lindsey Graham going off and making these highly volatile remarks right in Kiev and right on the eve of this attack on Russian aircraft deep inside Russia. She may be better aware even of neocon forces, neocon pressures within the intelligence community, outside of the intelligence community, in Congress for sure. Congress is in extremely anti-Russian mood right now, and Israel itself. I mean, the neocons and pro-Zionist forces are highly anti-Russian. You and I have talked in the past about the origin of neoconservatism, that it came really out of a very revolutionary ideology of Leon Trotsky during the Russian Revolution, which was talking about global revolution. And I think they've picked up on this idea that the United States will carry out global revolution for democracy everywhere if necessary. So it's extremely dangerous ideology, but supported by um, quite dangerous people. I'm worried that Tulsi felt it important to make that remark, and maybe she's directing it also at the president himself, who I think he may not be the world's smartest geopolitician, but I think he certainly must understand what she is saying.
Graham, when it comes to the role of Marco Rubio, do you feel that he's somehow, because the national security advisor to the United States, to the president of the United States, right, it seems that it's Marco Rubio as his Secretary of State, the national security advisor, and he has many, I don't know, USAID, and a lot of titles that he possesses right now. Who don't you think that the national security advisor, look at what has happened during the Biden administration, the role of Jake Sullivan, and he was so much bold. Every time we talk about Ukraine, we talk about the conflict, I mean, he was talking about all of them. Right now, is that position is gone in the Trump administration. Nobody seems, do they really care about to consider someone, I don't know, maybe a anti-war, someone that is, he doesn't need by the permission of the Congress, the permission of nobody's permission to put this guy in his position. Maybe he can use Douglas McGregor. I don't know if he's willing to do that, but he has, this position is not working in the United States. Do you think that is of concern for Donald Trump?
You know, I'm not sure that Rubio really matters all that much anymore. Um, I think Rubio has been playing the job of professional diplomat for quite some time, and it has been people like Witkoff who have been doing the serious negotiations. As you know, serious negotiations with Netanyahu, with the Iranians, and especially, above all, with Russia, and even directly with Putin. So if I were Marco Rubio, I would feel a little bit like I was being sidetracked from the main action. I think in this role, I think Trump finds that role for Rubio useful because the hard work, the tougher work, is being carried out by somebody. I hate to say it, but I think that Witkoff has a far better grasp of these issues, even though he's not a professional diplomat. I think he has an instinctive grasp of negotiations better than Rubio. And Rubio can put on a good face of all of this kind of thing, and maybe and Witkoff can take the blame if things go wrong. But I just don't think Rubio matters that much in determining policy anymore. We'll see. Maybe Trump will get tired of Witkoff. I don't know, but I just would not put too much importance, attribute too much importance to Rubio himself.
Graham, shifting the gear to what's going on between the United States and Iran, how do you feel about the way that they're trying to make some sort of negotiations with the case of Gaza, with the case of Hamas, and the United States in the recent call, the recent phone call between between Donald Trump and Netanyahu? It seems that as they reported on, I don't know if that's honest. It's what has happened, the reality of what has happened, but they're talking about that Donald Trump said to him, "You have to put an end to what's going on in Gaza." you cannot continue with this situation, because it's not all about, because we can Donald Trump is not just concerned about the situation in Gaza. He knows what's happening to Israel as well. He knows how the United States should support Israel in what's going on, and how the public opinion in the world is changing, is going against what's going on in Gaza. It's all about the pressure coming from the outside, from the within, from the United States. From You look at the United States, the public opinion in the United States has changed drastically. How do you feel about the talks? How do you feel about the way that Donald Trump may be capable to find something, to get something in the Middle East?
Well, Lima, as you know, there has been a very slow, too slow in my view, too slow movement on the part of some Western states, Canada and Netherlands and several others, criticizing the Gaza genocide. Well, the more to the point was declaring the two right-wing leaders within Israel. As being
And Gabriel and
putting put
Smotrich.
yeah putting actual sanctions against them personally. I think that's not enough, but it's a good start and it's a sign of some shift. Secondly, I think Trump and anybody who follows this issue has to be aware that the damage is not only to the Palestinians. Of course, it's shocking beyond belief, the suffering of Palestine, but even to Israel's own reputation, but to the U.S. reputation. The United States is still seen to be giving 100% backing to Israel on this issue. And Rubio just the other day said exactly that same thing, that we were joined forever. We were totally in lockstep. I forget the exact words he used, but he made it very clear that there was no daylight between the United States and Israel. So Trump has to understand that this is costing even the U.S. quite dearly. If we look at Bibi Netanyahu's goals, and you and I have talked, you've talked with other of your guests, it's very clear Bibi will do almost anything to stay in power. He knows that once he leaves office, that he will be liable for prosecution for various crimes or criminal acts, financial and otherwise. So from that ground alone, he does not want to leave office. Secondly, obviously, people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir do not, for them, this is the golden moment. Maybe even for Bibi as well, I think it is, but for even more for these two real ideologues, Zionist ideologues. If Trump falls, this might cause them to lose their opportunity for permanent ethnic cleansing of the West Bank and Gaza. So I think it's going to be a very tough sell for the U.S. to put pressure on Israel. And we know that virtually everyone in Congress is bought and paid for by the AIPAC, the Zionist lobby. And I'm not using those words loosely. We know that the amount of money given to almost every single candidate in the House and Senate by AIPAC is very powerful contribution and makes a big difference in their ability to run political campaigns. So the pressures against Washington bringing a change here is very tough. And I don't, Miriam Adelson, who has supported Trump with $100 million several times. I don't know what kind of pressure she still has on him, but I don't know how easy it is for Trump to move strongly against strong Zionist pressures in the United States, and even European fear of taking on Israel directly. It's just it's a tough game.
There is an Israeli journalist, Ravit Hesht, if I'm pronouncing his name, and wrote on Haaretz, it says that Netanyahu is using the threat of an attack on Iran to pressure ultra-Orthodox parties not to rush into dissolving the Knesset, the 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 Israeli parliament. If I don't know if we can call it the Israeli parliament, because he knows if that happens, that would be the end of his government. And he uses this. This article shows how somehow Netanyahu is manipulating with this attack on Iran. We're going to attack Iran. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. That's going to be big. And to somehow keep his position in Israel. I don't know how long does it take to with this game and the way that he's playing not only Israelis but also the United States and the whole West, I would argue.
Yes, the United States has talked for 20 years or more, 30 years, about the threat from Iran. And that's been an important foundation of American foreign policy in trying to keep the Gulf states aboard American policies, to bring them all together under the American umbrella to stand against Iran. I think that game now has run out. We see that the Gulf states now want to come to terms themselves with Iran. And this is probably worrying, I'm sure it's worrying Israeli hawks, which is most of them who are in power right now. I think Netanyahu and the right wingers want to continue to raise this fear of what Iran might do if Iran is allowed to even develop minor refinement of its uranium holdings. By the way, in talking about warmongering, I don't want to go back to the whole discussion, as we said again, but it was again unbelievably shocking that the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, who I believe is Norwegian, but the head of NATO, made the remark yesterday of saying that if we don't stop Russia right now in Ukraine, we better all start learning Russian. I mean, this was an incredible remark, just incredible remark. Even Washington has not said something quite that stupid. So I think in the case of Israel, it's very much the same. Maybe they haven't said that Israelis better start learning Persian, but it's pretty much the equivalent of that, of trying to maintain that fear. And I don't see, from what I do see about Israeli politics, I sense that Netanyahu still has a fair amount of support, and even his ethnic cleansing policies. There's just a lot of ethnic rage among Israeli right wingers for a long time. It's scary.
Graham, recently, 2 days ago, we've learned that the Iranian intelligence obtained a lot of documents from the Israeli nuclear program. And right now in Iranian media, they're putting a lot of pressure on the government, because in these documents, they found that IAEA was somehow collaborating with Israelis in providing them with everything, the talks that are happening, the secret documents that were related to the Iranian nuclear program, different sites, different programs they have been transferred to Israeli government, to Israeli intelligence. How the Iranian foreign minister just today said that an agreement ensuring the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program is within reach and could be finalized quickly. He noted that this aligns with both Iran's doctrine and the U.S. President Trump's stance on Iran nuclear weapons. Then he says no nuclear weapon. So Iran is prepared to reach an agreement. I don't know what's preventing this sort of agreement between the United States and Iran. Why Donald Trump is so hesitant. I don't know if that's right. Yesterday we learned that Netanyahu during the talk, 40 minutes of talk with Donald Trump, said he doesn't have he doesn't have anymore any problem with Iran's nuclear program to be enriched at a level of 3.6%. Putting that aside, what Netanyahu said doesn't matter. What Donald Trump says, what is his policy? Do you think if Iran is that much prepared, are we going to get it?
That's a very good question, Nima, and difficult to answer. First of all, I think you and I maybe had talked last week about the fact that any demand that Iran stop all enrichment was just a ridiculous demand and would go nowhere, and people should stop talking about it. So it's interesting that even Bibi Netanyahu seems to be willing to acknowledge the return to a 3.6 degree of enrichment. I think he's just facing the real world. But as you know, the other very interesting discussion on reaching an agreement with Iran on nuclear weapons, I think was put forth either by Qatar or Abu Dhabi, that called for possibly a joint nuclear program that would include Iran and the Gulf states in jointly developing peaceful nuclear energy. And you would know better than I, Nima, but I seem to recall that Iran did not reject that idea out of hand. But that's quite fascinating, and my sense is that Washington would be happy to do that. It would People like Trump and even some more moderate Zionists might see this as a chance to maneuver that situation, manipulate that situation into some kind of a broader peace deal between Iran and say Saudi Arabia. I don't remember whether Saudi Arabia was going to be part of that nuclear plan or not, but certainly UAE and Qatar were. So maybe Trump might see this as a good step forward towards normalization of relations, especially including Saudi Arabia with Iran. So I think there's something going on here, but we come back to the fact that hardline Zionists do not want to have anything to do with this. And I suspect that they will dominate American Congress even more powerfully than Bibi Netanyahu himself in some ways. They will just say this is the beginning, and everybody knows that Iran wants to destroy Israel. We will never tolerate this. Israel, on the contrary, Israel should be destroying Iran. That's the kind of language we've been hearing. I find it hard to overcome it, but this Gulf suggestion could be a brilliant step forward in the right direction.
Actually, the defense minister of Saudi Arabia, which is the brother of the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, when he went recently to Iran, the supreme leader of Iran suggested to him that they can provide them, they can help them in their nuclear program, and they can, because it's something to share, the technology, they can work with each other. I think that's everything. If that goes in that direction, that would be helpful for the United States. That would be the new policy. That would be some sort of fresh air of this old, devastated policy in the Middle East. That could bring a lot of good thing, I think, for the world, and not only for the countries in the region, but also for the United States.
I absolutely agree. I think it could be a real game changer for the entire region. Again, we run into the problem, though, as you know, Nima, that the present government in Israel, and I think it goes beyond just Bibi Netanyahu or Smotrich or Ben Gvir, but the desire to ethnically cleanse the West Bank, cleanse Gaza, and turn this into an entirely Jewish settlement area. That argument is going to be very hard to combat. If there is an agreement with Iran, it may affect that that plan, that hope. But we have to remember that there are very, very powerful forces still within Israel, right wing, and even in the general public, that might oppose this. And I would guess that most of American congressmen, taking orders from AIPAC and Israeli sources, would also oppose it, or at least make some problems with it. But yes, I'm encouraged. It's the first fresh thing I've heard uh, in a long, long time, and some new thinking about all this. It could be a real game changer.
Yeah.
And also put the Gulfies in charge for a change. It's nice to see the Gulfies coming up with ideas and doing things, and not just sort of semi-pro-Israeli Washington views.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Graham, for being with us today. Great
My,
pleasure, as always.
my pleasure, Nima. Some fascinating, difficult, troubling issues, but I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
See you soon, Graham.
Yep, take care. Khoda Hafiz.
Yeah. Khuda Hafiz.